Today I will be talking about my new book, What is Death? But I thought I would give you a little bit of reference of my previous books. I wrote What is Spirit, What is Peace, and What is Love? And the premise is the same. I interview 150 people from diverse backgrounds, and I ask them, what is spirit? What is peace? What is love? And they give me these incredible responses that I say are from their heart. That's why I subtitle all the books, Messages from the Heart, because I believe you can't answer those questions really from your head. You have to move to a deeper level within and answer those profound questions. And when I was writing What is Love, I say in there that love never dies. And I personally believe that. I feel the love of my parents standing with me right now. And so if love never dies, what is death? So I proceeded to write What is Death? I interviewed 150 people or more from diverse backgrounds and traditions and put them in this book. But this book is a little bit different. In the back, I have Define Your Legacy. And I say, think about your legacy and answer the questions with your heartfelt answers. So questions that I ask the reader to answer are, who am I? My most powerful personal quality. What I stand for and believe in. What is most important to me? The people who touched me most in life. How I will be remembered. How I look back on my life when I die. And my thoughts as I say goodbye to this life. And so I say, if you join all your answers from these questions, you will have your legacy in one document. And the other different quality about this book is in the back, I have a section called Final Thoughts. And there's 10 blank pages. And I say, this section is for you, so you may write your own thoughts about death and how you visualize your memorial or funeral service. You may find that writing your own obituary is a healing exercise. Through this book, I hope you can find more meaning in your life by contemplating, better understanding, accepting our inevitable transition into the next realm. So those are some of the differences in this book than my previous ones. My mother thought it was healthy from time to time to talk about death. And one time we were on an airplane together and she said, this was about 5 years before she died, she said, let's write my obituary. And at first I was taken back, and I am so grateful today that we did that. So we sat there together and she talked about the things that were really important to her. And I wrote down all the bullet points. And I kept a copy. And 5 years later, on November 1st, All Saints' Day, 2006, my mother died. And I was so grateful that I had more or less her obituary already written. It didn't reflect my thoughts about her life. It reflected her thoughts. It defined her essence of who she was. And she also sent my brother and my sister and I copies of her living will. And that was extremely helpful. Because at the time of death, you're under stress. And when somebody has been so thoughtful to have these things available to you, it takes away a lot of that pain and grief that you're already going through. My mother used to say, we're all going to die, it's a matter of when. So live rightly. And that's really the bottom line of the Buddhist teachings. When the Buddhist monks come here and build that beautiful mandala, they spend a week creating an art form that's magnificent. And each of those art pieces reflects something very spiritual in the Buddhist traditions. And I don't know if you've seen the monks, they're painstakingly building the mandala for weeks. And then at the end, they have a ceremony where they sweep it up. And that's the impermanence of life. And that's in their tradition, to teach us impermanence. Now, when my mother died, in her Bible, she not only had beautiful little writings that she left all of us, but she had been clipping out for probably 30 years from magazines and newspapers, things that really meant something to her, that really reflected her thoughts on life. So again, when I was planning her funeral service, I went to her Bible, and I was able to create this wonderful booklet that I passed out at the memorial service, celebrating the life of my mother, Laura Brockway. And I had pictures of her in the back of all the things she did in her life. But more importantly, I could give to everyone who attended this service things that were in her Bible that she saved for 30 years that meant something, that reflected who she was. And I'm just going to read a few. There's about 20. I'm only going to read a few of them. But it'll give you an essence of who she was. So she wrote to us, she said, "To my precious, wonderful family," it was in her handwriting. And then there was this poem, "A Mother's Farewell to Her Children." "When I must leave you for a little while," and she underlines this part, "please do not grieve and shed wild tears, and hug your sorrow to you through the years. But start out bravely with a gallant smile, and for my sake and in my name, live on and do all things the same. Feed not your loneliness on empty days, but fill each waking hour in useful ways. Reach out your hand in comfort and in cheer, and I, in turn, will comfort you and hold you near. And never, never be afraid to die, for I am waiting for you in the sky." I found that in her Bible, and then underneath that she put, "You were all the love and pride and happiness of my life. You were the wind beneath my wings. I love you, Mom." And so my brother and sister and I went through all these beautiful things, ever close in mind and heart, when I'm gone, all these beautiful things that she left us, and we were able to put them in this booklet. And here's another one I think is so beautiful. Ever close in mind and heart, no further away than a picture, a smile, a remembered phrase. Our loved ones live in memory, so close in so many ways. For how often does a sunset bring nostalgic thoughts to mind of moments that our loved ones shared in days now left behind? How often has a flower or a crystal autumn sky bring golden recollections of happy days gone by? Yes, memory has a magic way of keeping loved ones near. Ever close in mind and heart are the ones we hold most dear. And then she had a neighbor named Marcia Clement, and she was her neighbor for 35 years, lived across the street from my mother in Richland, Washington. And so I put this tribute to my mother in her memorial, and it was written by Marcia. It says, "Anyone who knows Laura Brockway also knows the meaning of true love. Laura is more than a neighbor and a friend. She belongs among that special class of people whose goodness transcends human understanding. Those who know Laura well are amazed at her gentle, loving qualities that have enriched the lives of those close to her. Laura's humility enables her to seek out what is best in others. She has that magical power to make others feel good about themselves, the greatest gift that can be bestowed upon a friend. God does work in mysterious ways, as we are too often too concerned with the whys of life. As the ultimate judge in the courtroom of heaven, he gives us, while on earth, our many trials and tribulations. Often the truly good are tested longer, but in the final verdict, they are always the winners. There is no need for material proof to believe that heaven indeed exists, for Laura has already spent her time in earth being an angel, delivering God's most magnificent gift, abounding love. Heaven will always have a special place for angels like Laura." So So I was able to capture what I feel is the essence of my mother, because she was kind enough to leave me those important articles and sayings and things about her life. So I'm going to read a little bit from my book, and then I will have some responses from people out in the audience as well. But this is my introduction. I'm only going to read a few pages. After I finished writing What is Love, a tiny voice said to me, "Write what is death?" Love and death are so intertwined, and each teaches us about life. A dear friend once said, "The three most important days of our lives are the day we are born, the day we figure out why we were born, and the day we die." Our divine purposes are as varied as human beings are unique. Perhaps one of the most important questions we can ask ourselves is, if I die tomorrow, how will I be remembered? Your answer will teach you how to live. Through this book, I hope you can find more meaning in your life by better understanding and accepting our inevitable transition into the next realm. Death has long been a taboo topic for people. We avoid it, we dance around it, we don't really know what to say when someone dies. We are taught to believe funerals are depressing and loss of life is a tragedy. Death in our society is generally seen as a negative thing, rather than a continuation of a natural cycle that begins when we are born, intensifying as we become more emotionally and spiritually evolved, and comes to fruition when we die. Death will always remain the great mystery. It is our personal faith that defines our feelings and thoughts about death. I believe that faith can grow as we open our hearts to gentleness, love, and compassion. This openness prepares us for death and teaches us how to live today. In this book, you'll find theories, beliefs, personal wisdom, experience-based knowledge, and intuitive insights from almost 150 people of various religious backgrounds, customs, and beliefs. From doctors and clergies to people who rarely talk about death and dying, their diverse points of view point to so many possibilities. It is my hope that just by reading through their responses, new doors of understanding will open for you. In Insights a few weeks ago, we were reading from What is Death and talking and sharing about it. And Greg Anderson brought up that he has done hundreds of funeral services. And at the funeral services, people don't talk about the house people lived in, or how hard they worked, or how much money they had in the bank. They talked about how loving they were, the kind of father they were, the type of friend that they were to someone, their loving essence. And it reminds me of my friend Lynn Arundale, and her New Year's resolution was always the same every year. May I be more loving this year than I was last year. So I think that death teaches us how to live rightly. I'm going to read from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and I read most of her materials before I wrote my book, What is Death? She was really a pioneer of transitions. She was an amazing woman. She was an MD, and she studied life and death and wrote many, many books about it. But this is one of my favorite passages from her. And she had this great German accent. Not that I'm going to try it. I'll try to do a little bit, but she would go, "Look forward to your transition. It's the first time you'll experience unconditional love. There will be all peace and love, and all the nightmares and the turmoil you went through in your life will be like nothing. When you make your transition, you are asked two things, basically. How much love you have been able to give and receive, and how much service you have rendered. And you will know every consequence of every deed, every thought, and every word you have ever uttered. And you see how many chances you have missed. But you also see how a nice act of kindness has touched hundreds of lives that you're totally unaware of. So concentrate on love while you're still around. And teach your children early unconditional love. So remember, concentrate on love and look forward to the transition. It's the most beautiful experience you can ever imagine. Vayos con Dios. That's how she ends that. I'm bringing in a Mind Up program to the Valley to teach teachers, to teach children how to be mindful and go within. And Goldie Hawn recently spoke about that. And in her speech, she said when she was little, people would ask her, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And she'd say, "I want to be happy." And they go, "No, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And she'd say, "I want to be happy." I think we need to be happy. That's a good choice. And I think of my mother who went through so much adversity. 4 open heart surgeries, she lost a son, she lost her beloved husband, and she was still happy. She said, "I have to make myself strong, that life is for the living, and you have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and still be loving and happy." And she went through so much, and so I have that forever image of her that lives on with me as I stand here today. So we have people in the audience that were responders when I asked them what is death. And I would like them to share with us. Haley, can you begin, please? Thank you. Thank you. And Dorothy?
Death is a beginning. What a comfort to not just wish or hope, but to know that life goes on after physical death. In my nearly 40 years as a practicing parapsychologist, I have witnessed and experienced many paranormal life-after-life occurrences that have confirmed the existence of the soul after the event we call death. The loving connection that we have with loved ones in this life continues to nourish, protect, and replenish those who are still on this plane after their transition or passing. Opening our hearts and minds to the many realities that exist around us gives one a sense of optimism, joy, and lack of fear of the unknown. So, death is a beginning, another path to go down in this individual journey we call life. I'd like to add, I think there's a very eloquent portion also written by our son Michael. What we call death is simply the end point of one cycle involved with the material realm. Think of a guitar string. When plucked, it goes back and forth between 2 nodal points, crossing the midpoint each time. When the string finally becomes still, it is at rest. Life consists of not only one, but many strings vibrating to ever-changing chords. Death is when the strings settle down and exist simply as potential waiting to once again be plucked. What chord combinations will you play?
Thank you. And TJ?
Shiloh was my only child. On June 2, 1992, Shiloh and I talked about what each of us thought, and it was our opinion. We just went back to be the God we came from. She knew that death was not to be feared. She accepted as true that when she was done here on earth, she would leave. She wanted her ashes spread in the mountains. I miss her each day, and when I think of her, I see the smile she almost always had and hear the laughter she voiced often. I remember the fun we had backpacking, skiing, traveling, and laughing with each other. I killed my daughter, and I'm 100% responsible for her death. I live with this knowledge. Yet I live my life to the fullest, and each day I work at being the best and happiest person I can be. I do this because I know she would not want me to feel guilty, be unhappy, or dwell in remorse. She sometimes called me my best dad. My father never spoke about death, ever. When Shiloh met death, my father opened up about it, wrote a living will, gave power of attorney, and told us he wanted his ashes spread on the mountain where he lived. Months after Shiloh died, I was in a deep meditation, and she came to me and I said, "Shiloh, I killed you." And she replied, "No, you didn't." In another meditation, she said, "Dad, I'm a higher God now." 8 days before she died, she asked a good friend if she knew how she was going to die. This friend said she did not, and asked Shiloh why she asked. Shiloh said because she knew she would die in an automobile accident. 12 days before she died, she told her mother that if she should die in an automobile accident or something, she wanted to be cremated and her ashes spread in the mountains. Shiloh's ashes were given to Lake Manesswar at the base of Mount Kalos in Tibet. Her life was filled with love, peace, and laughter. As a child, she was unconditionally loved and was encouraged to find her own way. She and I read The Prophet by Gibran, in particular on children, and we knew this was how we were with each other. I said, "I love you to," we said, "I love you" to each other every day. We hugged a lot. We left nothing unsaid. When Shiloh met death, we were complete with each other. It was my privilege to be a father for 20 years with my best kid, and death cannot take that away.
Thank you. Thank you. Patricia?
Death is nothing more and nothing less than a step in our personal evolution as we continue to move and grow towards greater wholeness and a more perfect union with all that is. The return to the source of our being at the end of our earthly journey is simply a change of form as we are transmuted back into spirit to continue to refine our essence in the subtler realms of existence, taking with us the imprint of all that we have learned and all that we have loved in this life.
Thank you. And Greg?
Mine is under a section under Christianity. In the back, there's different religions, and this one, along with Cynthia's, is under Christianity. A classical Christian perspective on death typically refers to the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. The Gospel of John is often quoted, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life." In the epistle in Romans we read, "For if we have been united with Christ in death like his, we shall certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his. We shall certainly..." Yet the subject of death and life after death has always been a part of everyone's human story since the beginning of history. And this Christian emphasis is not necessarily the story of Jesus, but rather the storytellers of Jesus after Jesus' death. Professor Marcus Borg expresses concern with the overemphasis of the Christian afterlife as it distracts from the more essential teachings of Jesus. It can also be divisive, creating distinctions between the believers and non-believers, righteous and the unrighteous. Borg also reminds us that there is nothing in the Lord's Prayer asking that God take us to heaven when we die. Rather, it is stated, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven." Marcus Borg states that as a committed Christian, he is agnostic about the afterlife and clarifies agnostic precisely as one who simply does not know for certain. Then he states, "What I do affirm is very simply, when we die, we do not die into nothingness, but we die into God." In other words of the Apostle Paul, we live unto the Lord and we die unto the Lord. So whether we live or die, we are the Lord's. For me, that is enough.
Thank you. Another responder, like Carl Kaiser in the book, tells us that when she was diagnosed with cancer, it was ultimately a great gift to her. And it reminds me of Steve Jobs, who, of course, all of you know recently died. Steve was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2004, and he knew he was going to die in a few years. And by the way, Steve Jobs was a Buddhist, and after he learned that he was going to die, gave many inspiring talks in which he inserted some mention of death and its meaning. And in his famous commencement speech that he gave at Stanford University, and we read that together in Insights a few weeks ago, he said, quote, "Remembering that you're going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose." And then he said, Steve said that he learned long ago to live like every day was his last. But he said that once he knew his death was imminent, he became even more committed to that idea. And here's another quote I found of his. "When I was 17, I read a quote that went something like this: 'If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right.' It made an impression on me, and since then, for the past 33 years, I have looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, what would I want to do? What I'm about to do today, is it something I really want? And whenever the answer has been no for far too many days in a row, I need to change something." Wise person. So I will end by reading how I end my book on page 162. And I leave you with my sincerest wishes that, 1, you realize how precious life is and treasure every moment of your life and those you love. 2, you learn that love never dies and that often we can be closer to someone after they die than while they were physically present. And 3, you strengthen your heart by the repeated exercise of loving, and that you grow strong enough that you are willing to love completely, even though you know how much you may suffer later by loss. For me, it is always better to have loved and lost than not to have loved at all. Amen.